Is the government coming to take away your loot boxes? Ladies and gentlemen, I am Josh, one amongst many Pemberton, and today I want to talk to you about this new resurrection, I suppose, of a very hot button topic in video games in general, but also very near and dear to our hearts as the Overwatch community, because every single time this debate happens, every single time Overwatch is discussed, the article always leads with a great big picture of the Overwatch loot box, which I suppose is a double-edged sword for Blizzard. Like, congratulations, you've made a really iconic design that clearly resonates with a lot of people, but it's also pretty much always posted in front of bad news or people just decrying the existence of loot boxes in general. So, you know, it's a double-edged sword, I suppose. But why is this happening? What's going on in the world of loot boxes? Well, on November 27th, the Federal Trade Commission, very dull and dry sounding, I know, started raising the discussion of loot boxes. So this is the American government now continuing to raise the issue and continuing to start to schedule appointments and discussions about the oversight, I suppose, of how loot boxes worked. And this all sort of sprang up on the back of a British report that was even on the BBC News. I literally had my mum the other day when she came by to drop off some shopping over at my flat. She sort of stopped by and she was like, "Oh, by the way, are you trying to make kids gamble? Is that what you're trying to do?" And I had to explain to her, no, that's just sort of loot boxes, because on the BBC they published this article, they published this discussion about a paper that was written in the UK about how loot boxes might be influencing children's behavior, how there is, in a sort of recent times, there's a resurgence or an uptick, I suppose, in the number of child gamblers, and this might be linked, you know, through statistical means to loot boxes in gaming, that kids are very much exposed to loot boxes these days, and that might be normalizing gambling behavior, and as a result these kids are more likely to go on have gambling disorders later in life, or just be gambling as a child irresponsibly, which is a bad thing. Now, this could just be, you know, people going, "Oh my god, did somebody please think of the children?" But unlike debates that happened sort of this nature before, you know, oh, do the video games make kids violent? This isn't virtual gambling. This is just gambling, right? There's no virtual aspect to it at the end of the day. You still insert money, you get loot box, and sure, you can make the very, technically it's not gambling because you are going to get something every single time. So for Overwatch's example, if you pay money for a loot box, no matter what you get out of that loot box, you will get something. Even if it's all 4 duplicates, you will still get coins that you can then go on to pay to get actual items out of it. So you get something every single time. But for me, speaking personally, I have a pretty much full hero gallery, so when I get a bunch of duplicates, it just ticks up a number that's already huge. I can already use those coins to try and get everything I want no matter what. So it's like, well, I kind of just got nothing. I've pretty regularly done this on stream. I probably won't do it anymore because it just feels so kind of pointless, but on stream I've generally done 50 loot boxes whenever an event's rolled around as a way to just introduce myself to the new stuff. I kind of like not spoiling myself too much on all the skins that come out, so when skins get leaked, you know, unlike Stylosa who's actively hunting those things, I kind of go, I'll wait for the event and then I'll surprise myself and see all the cool stuff when it arrives. And as a result, it's very difficult for me to justify paying for loot boxes, and this is an issue that does kind of hit Overwatch pretty hard, because I have friends that don't like loot boxes, right? And they let me know about this every single time this discussion comes up. They really don't like them, and what they've noticed throughout the recent events, and I've noticed this, certainly I'm sure you guys have all felt this at the very least, is that more and more of these events have nothing but legendary skins, or just like a lot of legendary skins, maybe 1 or 2 epic skins, and then probably not much else on the lower tiers of loot drop, basically. So what they've done is they've just introduced all these items into the legendary tier and then made it very unlikely that you're going to be able to get them. So that's kind of going, oh, well, maybe you need a little bit of a hand getting that. Well, if you give me some money, then I can make it more likely, but not guaranteed, that you will get those items. Now then, I can kind of understand Blizzard on this one. I can probably even understand that this might not be a completely internal conscious decision, right? I am a creative myself. I like to draw as a hobby, and if you give me the idea of, oh, well, you can either do a recolor, or you can do this whole wild new concept of, oh, here's Ash, but instead of a biker cowboy, she's a mafioso, or here's Winston, what's his scuba gear look like? What's Winston look like if he was this? Like, that's way cooler, that's way more interesting, that's way more engaging as a creative than just going, oh, well, here's a slide slight recolor, or here's a slight thing with this, or here's like, you know, maybe they want to just, you know, you hear, oh my god, this skin looks amazing in a comic. So like the Hanzo skin, for example, an artist drew him in a more casual look, and suddenly the game developer, like a modeler, comes along and goes, oh, maybe I want to try and make that. And naturally that's going to be a legendary skin. So maybe it's coming from there, but the cynics out there, and you know, if you are a cynic, like a lot of us are these days, it feels like, then you also imagine some bean counter going, oh, well, if we have so many legendaries, and they're more likely to buy loot boxes, and as a result, yeah, it just doesn't feel good. It feels like you are being preyed upon, almost, when you see all the shiny new skins and everything's pointing you to go, look at these cool new skins that you might be able to get if you either play all the time, or if you just give us some money, then it's more likely you'll get them, but you probably still won't anyway. Now then, it's nowhere near as bad as when Overwatch was first released. I remember those halcyon days ages ago, before Brigitte existed and before Hanzo had his get out of being a terrible character free button with storm arrows. No, back then you actually couldn't buy things with credits, and thank goodness they've added that system, because it was horrifically bad beforehand. They've also since like made the loot boxes friendlier overall, so you're less likely to get duplicates. So if there is things available that you can get, then you're more likely to just get those things. You're not going to get more legendaries, but when a legendary does come around, you're much less likely to get something like, oh, that Bastion skin that you already have. You're more likely to get something else that you can actually use. So that's at least nicer, but it still doesn't get past the point that at the end of the day, wouldn't it be nice to just get things? Wouldn't it be nice to just use credits and just get things? But then you've got to remember there's a double-edged sword here. So if this does happen, you can make the argument that, well, loot boxes fund the game somewhat, right? Loot boxes are a huge industry. The report cites $50 billion industry in loot boxes. Loot boxes alone, not gaming, loot boxes alone by 2022, right? That's not current, but loot boxes are so endemic, they expect that loot boxes are going to spread in through more and more games and are going to generate tons and tons and tons and tons of money. So then game developers are very much incentivized to try and work these systems in and trying to encourage you to spend money in those loot box systems. If you take those systems away, well, companies aren't just going to go, oh, well, that's that. They're going to go, well, how can we make money instead? So, for example, I remember a lot of systems where you couldn't get things that looked like legendary skins. Let's just use the Overwatch parlance. Let's just use legendary skins. You wouldn't be able to get legendary skins through in-game means. You'd have to just spend money to get a secondary currency, Overwatch bucks, and then you would spend those Overwatch bucks on getting the legendary skins that you couldn't get using credits. And to me, that feels like a loss, right? That it's still kind of okay in that you know what you're getting, you know what you're paying for, and then as a consumer, you can make a decision on going, well, is it really worth me spending $10 to get a skin on a hero that I will barely use? Then you'll probably go, no. You'd instead spend your money in more discerning ways, hopefully. So is that really worse? Is that really better? Will it sort of make the game feel less complete? Will it make events feel worse as well? If you sort of roll around and you know that, oh, well, there's no chance of me getting that cool Sombra skin or that cool Doomfist skin because I'd have to spend real money to be able to get that. Knowing Blizzard, they probably wouldn't make that the case, but then they absolutely could. Like, World of Warcraft has a cash shop with extremely high prices, if you ask me, for a bunch of exclusive items, for example. That system doesn't use loot boxes, it uses the more old school system, but as a result it helps keep the servers running, it helps keep the lights on, and ultimately that's what the objective of this cash is for, hopefully, is to pay for more content to be developed, to pay the developers to keep working and not the developers to go on fancy holidays, although, you know, if they have holiday time, I don't begrudge them going on fancy holidays, of course. But more the idea is that, oh well, Overwatch can only exist as a long-term game, and you can only get free maps and free heroes and free like cinematics and free comics and all this stuff off the bag of money that loot boxes are making. So it's not all negatives to loot boxes, but in my mind, as a consumer, my responsibility it should be first to me, right? It should be up to the company to generate revenue, to decide what is worth developing, what is not worth developing, what is a good use of our money, and what's most likely to make the game fun and enjoyable for our players. Because I've kept this discussion very much focused on Overwatch, and I've done that intentionally because, you know, this Unit Loss is largely an Overwatch community-driven exercise, like website, YouTube channel, all that kind of stuff. We like discussing Overwatch here, and as a result, we've been very much centered on Overwatch. I'm not going to say that Overwatch is completely clean, but I will say that Overwatch is a lot better than a number of other games. But the important thing to realize here is that oftentimes legislation and things like regulations tend to be a bit more of a cudgel and less of a scalpel. If it's going to hit loot boxes in one way, it's probably going to hit loot boxes across the board. And the reason why this is even relevant is that I'm naturally sure that game development companies like Blizzard are going to be paying attention to the fact that the US Federal Trade Commission is looking at this kind of stuff and going to have to start considering alternatives well in advance so they can get those systems working, tested, and make sure that they roll out painlessly. But this is also something, and this is really why I wanted to make this video, really why I wanted to sort of bring this issue to the fore, because I want to know what you guys think. I want to know what you guys think about this kind of stuff, if you guys are going to be celebrating and dancing on the graves of loot boxes going away, or if you're more thinking like, well, it's fair enough that the companies monetize this kind of stuff. I'm curious to see where people land on this issue and the Overwatch community's overall response, and well, there's nowhere better to find that than here. Speaking for me, loot isn't really a huge driver of my gameplay experience. I mostly care about things like the balance of the game, the health of the competitive scene as well, and just content that I can actually play around in rather than stuff that I can just look at that looks pretty. I am very much sort of a gameplay first kind of guy, but I know through experience that a lot of people do feel very, very passionately about loot, and this is going to have impacts and ramifications on how that loot is distributed and how you're going to get that loot. Very much worth keeping an eye on in the long term, ladies and gentlemen. And I think that's where I shall love you and leave you. If you do want to find more stuff with me, you can of course find me at @one_amongst_many and on twitch.tv as well at /ESL_one_amongst_many. Do remember to click that bell if you want to be notified when a video goes live, and hit subscribe as well if you haven't already on the channel. All that good YouTube stuff. But I really want to know what you guys' thoughts are. Like, I really want to know. I'm definitely going to be reading through these comments, and I look forward to seeing what people think about this sort of thing. Otherwise, if you still want to know about all things Unit Lost, definitely follow at Unit Lost Gaming on Twitter as well, and I'll see you next time. Toodles.